We are going to do a little bit of stage changing whilst I continue on. So I have the pleasure of being joined onto the stage by my boss, Mike Johnson, for the next session, which is strategies to mitigate the interconnected risks of compliance challenges in a dynamic business environment. It may win the longest title, but it's definitely worthwhile. Mike, over to you.
Thank you, John. Good morning. Good morning. As John said, my name is Michael Johnson. I run global sales here for us at MetricStream, and I have the honor of hosting our next session. As Jonathan said, I'm just going to read that title one more time. It's a pretty long topic here. The topic is navigating interconnected risks and compliance in today's business environment. We want to be able to give you the tools to stay ahead and balance risk and innovation. So I have an all-star panel here that's going to join me on stage. If you guys could put your hands together when I bring them on stage here. Let me start with Azizi bin. Azizi? Azizi. Azizi is the Chief Compliance Officer at Petronas. We also have Toby Billington. Toby is the Managing Director, ICG Business Risks and Controls at Citi. Thank you, guys. All right. So let's get started here. Toby, we're going to start with you. So thinking about all the risks facing organizations today, Toby, how can companies identify and prioritize the most significant, interconnected, and emerging risks? Also, what methodologies or approaches do you recommend for this?
Yeah, thanks for that. So first of all, just before we start, my current role, I'm currently looking after the global compliance risk in the first line for the institutional client group at Citi. For those of you who read the papers, you'll know that that is about to cease to exist. So interesting times in terms of personal risk and personal jeopardy at the moment. And I just want to make the point that comments I make today are my own comments, not comments on behalf of Citi. I'm conscious we're not on Chatham House. To answer the question, though, to get actually to the point, I think the big problem that we currently have when we're running very large global organizations, which most people here are, is that we have multiple data points coming in. So for us, where we do our risk assessments, we do the risk assessments at an assessment unit level, which goes down as low as cash equities Hong Kong. So there'll be cash equities Hong Kong, there'll be derivative equities Hong Kong, there'll be equities Hong Kong, then there'll be equities Asia Pacific, then there'll be equities global. And that level of aggregation and that level of disparity of data points makes it very difficult to actually identify where real issues are. And I think for me, that's where AI potentially has an enormous impact to play, because it will enable us to scan the universe in a more effective way and be able to identify genuine pain points without the need for humans to be trying to assess these enormous quantities of data, which I just think isn't possible. The flip side of that, then, the risk that was being discussed just before, was the problem with AI is it's a very credible liar. There was a brilliant Radio 4 series the other day I was listening to, and they had been using ChatGPT to basically write biographies. And then they were pointing out the errors in those biographies and the incredibly credible lies that the AI tool was creating. My favorite one was someone was born in a town called Dorking, and that was based on the fact that the AI knew where he lived, knew where his parents lived, had basically put all this information together and had said, clearly, logically, this guy should have been born in Dorking. And he absolutely logically should have been born in Dorking because that was his local hospital. In fact, he was born in Manchester because his mum had been visiting her mother that weekend and happened to go into labour when she was up there. And the AI hadn't picked up on that because there was nothing out there for it to pick up on. There was no record of his birth in Manchester that was publicly available. That's a fairly trite example, but it's a very real one. And I think that's a danger that we all face with technology. And I think it's a challenge that we have, is to make sure that we're not allowing technology to tell us stuff that we then react to, which is just not true. Or worse still, that it's flagging things as massive concerns that genuinely ought not to be. So I think that's the challenge that we have. I think the opportunity we have, though, is far outweighing that challenge, which is we have this amazing opportunity now to suddenly take our millions of data points and have a machine distill those into a credible set of outputs. I think you still need a human at the end of that process. There will always be that human needed to do that credible challenge and to ensure that this risk of credible lies is being mitigated by a sensible human being at the end of the process saying, okay, this is what it's telling me. Does this actually look like it's right, or is this just wrong? But I think there's great opportunities. And I was actually at another event last week where somebody had, as a premise, had asked ChatGPT 2 questions. One was, what did it think about 3 lines of defense, and could it comment on each of the 3 lines? And the other one, it said, could it horizon scan and say, what are the biggest risks for the financial services industry for the forward-looking year? And actually, the output from that was pretty good, actually. I was pretty impressed with what it did. And the premise for those group is that they're going to ask that question every year for the next 5 or so years and see how that changes. And then just one last point just before I stop. I think the other thing that's quite interesting is if we look at what happened with COVID and people's planning for contingency planning and business continuity planning, every bank that I'm aware of had an epidemic as one of their scenarios. Not a single bank that I'm aware of had a pandemic as a scenario. So we all had contingency plans whereby we shut down a country and carried on those activities somewhere else. To my knowledge, not one of us had a scenario where we shut down all of our activity in all of our countries and had to find another way to do it. So we clearly have a way to go.
Excellent. Azizi, your perspective?
I think for Petronas, being an energy company, integrated company, we have considered a lot of factors, but I think the main one is basically on the policy and also the mindset of the people. How do we actually get everyone to actually subscribe to the same? So in our organization, I think that is the paramount, and how we actually get everyone to subscribe to the same is through all the programs and also the activities and connected everyone together. So those are the paramount basis of how we deal with that, how we approach things to make sure that everyone is thinking about it, everyone is realizing that the impact of that to our organization. So that's basically the paramount area for our organization.
All right, thank you. So Azizi, we're going to go to you with the next question. How about regulatory change? The regulatory environment is evolving, including new regulations such as DORA. How can organizations stay ahead of compliance requirements? Also, what resources or approaches do you recommend in staying informed about regulatory changes?
Interestingly, in Petronas, we have 12 broad risk areas that we identified. That is actually under the corporate level. And in addition to that, we have also each businesses within the organization, their own business risk identification where they have to actually manage. So there are already 2 levels between the business and the corporate. So out of that corporate, one of the items that we have progressed for the last few years, a couple of years, under my section was on the legal compliance areas. So we have seen the areas of sanctions, export control, competition, privacy, ethics and integrity, basically new areas which is actually going to impact our organization. So those are actually under our legal and regulatory corporate risk and that we have been managing. So that actually item has been actually taken out and developed further into all these risk areas that we need to ensure good programs, enough programs and activities for our group of companies. So at the moment we have more than 500 companies across the world, and we are operating in more than 50 countries. So how do we actually get everyone together? So those are actually under my section, under the bigger corporate risk management, and those actually program will be done and will be looked after by my department under the corporate strategy planning, compliance strategy planning, and also compliance management operations, with the support of the corporate functions to ensure that all those areas that I mentioned just now are fully covered. So the activities must be connected and channeled back to the corporate risk profile or management just now to ensure that when we do the reporting, that is actually done in a concerted manner so that the management or the board member know that those are being looked at and have been actually assessed from time to time. And by the way, we are doing the quarterly reporting anyway to our management as well as our board. So those kind of items will be highlighted. And as much as possible, we will ensure that all those programs will not lead to any breach of all those items that I mentioned. So there are always balance in terms of how much do we do things, whether it's enough or not, but at the same time, we also need to use the whatever available system that we could get to support the program that we have, to ensure that all those are being looked at the same time, and to unite all those companies and people across the world to ensure that everyone is thinking about the same thing in terms of compliance, in terms of avoiding any breach, and to consult whenever they require to make sure that those are ingrained, embed in their processes.
Thank you. Toby, your thoughts?
Similarly, I look after prudential and regulatory risk. It's one of the risk stripes that I'm responsible for. At the risk of doing a numbers game, 94 countries for us, so it's even more. I think the challenge that we always will have, and I think other multinationals will always have, is that clearly we have some rules and regulations that are very important to our home regulator, extraterritorial, and then we have other regulations which are country-specific in very small countries where we have a small presence. So what we've done is we've ranked our regulations 1 through 5, with Tier 1 regs being those multinational regulations which apply globally everywhere with big regulators. So a good example would be MiFID in Europe is one of our Tier 1 regulations, because clearly non-compliance with MiFID is not an option for a bank that's trying to operate in Europe or the UK. So that's the sort of the mechanism. We have a central team within compliance who basically are responsible for collecting globally all of those laws, rules and regs in, and collecting in all the changes to those. As you can imagine, there's a lot of change every month to those laws, rules and regs. And what they do is they basically determine what tiering they should be, and then there's a very robust mechanism for pushing that information back out to the relevant places. So obviously if it's a change to a Tier 1 reg, that is a mechanism and a framework which pushes it out globally to all of the businesses. Conversely, if there's some minor change to law, rule or regulation in any of the smaller countries in which we operate, it's a mechanism that just pushes it out to that local country management. So it's a nuanced approach, but I think it gives us the best chance we can have to be 100% compliant with all of the laws, rules and regs that we can be. Clearly, like every bank, we're not 100% compliant, we can't be, and we do have breaches, but we strive to avoid them and keep them to a minimum using that mechanism.
Okay, excellent. Toby, coming back to you with the next question, how can businesses strike a balance between innovation and risk management while ensuring compliance and risk mitigation? What innovations are you seeing?
So actually, this gets back to the conversation we had earlier on about AI. I think we're learning a lot. So I had an experience, not at this bank, at a bank I worked at a few banks ago, who can remain nameless, but we were doing some very, very early work looking at some of our trading software, and particularly where we had machine learning embedded in our trading software. So this was now, every bank does this now, but in those days they didn't. What we did was we found an FX algorithm which had inbuilt machine learning, and basically it had taught itself to do last look, and basically was trading on its own quite happily, doing a heads I win, tail you lose with every single trade. So it never executed a trade where it lost money. Now, it hadn't been programmed to do that, but the problem you have with computers is that they don't have a conscience unless you program one in for them. So they will just logically do the most sensible thing they can do, which in this instance was, I'm programmed to make money out of FX trading, so I will never do something that's good for a client. I will always make sure that I make money. And that was a completely logical outcome. It just wasn't an intended outcome. And when we found it, we killed it, as you'd expect. But I think, if you think that was probably only 9 years ago, I reckon. Now, we've come an awfully long way since then, in the last 9 years for it too. So what I've just described is something I would hope that every banker in the room is going, well, yeah, could we definitely have controls now that would stop that from happening, and we actively go and make sure that kind of thing can't happen. But it's pretty recently that we didn't, as an industry, generally do that, and weren't really looking for that. So I guess the challenge we have with AI and other unknown technologies is we don't know what they're going to do potentially that we haven't thought about yet. So the thing that we're all sitting here talking about in 9 years' time going, gosh, isn't it insane that we weren't looking for this? I think that's probably, for me, the biggest challenge.
Okay. Azizi, your perspective?
For Petronas, we have a few kind of initiative efforts as far as innovation is concerned. I think as far as employees, staff are concerned, we always have this encouragement for them to innovate. And it's part of our cultural belief as well that everyone needs to perform that and actually push for that to ensure that we challenge the norms, push the boundaries to make sure that people are thinking and trying their best. So that has actually been rolled out for the last 5 years. So I think that has become a trait of our employees. And the other initiative is that we have this innovation garage, where any new big ideas can be presented, can be talked about, and we provide a session for anyone, any employee, or any project team to actually present it and try it, and you have a group of people that could actually challenge it and see where they can go beyond what they are thinking at the moment. So I think that is the support that the management is giving, that idea, can be, any kind of idea that that the staff is thinking about for improvement, for new things or whatever that they are doing within their area of work. So those are actually all those initiatives that Petronas are actually giving to the staff. But at the same time, we need to balance the innovation and risk as well. But this is where, as far as we are concerned, we have developed a lot of system in place as well to actually cover all these GRC matter, so that people are guided in that sense, and not just going to push through everything which may not be in line with our objective as an organization. So those are the balance that we are doing to ensure that people are really aligned and at the same time could actually innovate and achieve new things beyond what people currently expect. Right.
Okay, Azizi, thank you. Azizi, you talked about culture there. I want to dive a little bit deeper. What role does cross-functional collaboration and culture play in addressing interconnected risks? What strategies have you seen successful organizations employ to foster collaboration among the different departments in the organization?
Okay, for Petronas, we already have all these initiatives in place to ensure that the collaboration takes place together with what we have actually planned at the corporate level. One item that is very important for us is to have a clear leadership and accountability, and that actually have been put in place. And each leader is required to really understand having in mind of what our corporate risk profile is, as well as our business risk profile. So that is very important in order for them to make sure that they can actually direct and lead their respective sectors, but at the same time could actually converge, at the corporate level. So we are together in doing whatever that we are doing across the organization, but achieving the same objective. The second one is that the common language, we are requesting all our employees to, do all this enterprise risk management as well as your risk assessment in accordance with our policy in terms of how we do our assessment. And because of that policy has been made in place, so everyone must use the same language in terms of assessing risk. And also, of course, we cannot forget about following up, having regular meetings and workshops in terms of assessing the matter. And as we are at the various level of the organization, we need to ensure that those are being practiced, embedded in their process of work. And of course, not forgetting, as what Toby mentioned on AI, we are new to AI, but we don't discount that we need to actually incorporate the AI into our process. But at the moment, we are still assessing which part of that we could actually incorporate. So that's basically how the cross-functional collaboration that we do that could actually help us unite and achieve our objective through the same strategies and practices.
Excellent. Toby, coming back to you on that, your thoughts on culture and collaboration and how it helps you manage interconnected risks?
Yeah, so anybody in the room who works for a bank will know that banks are typically not the most collaborative organisations, just because of the nature of the way we measure success in our industry, where it's a revenue measure, and therefore you're competing business line by business line against each other. So they're not naturally collaborative environments. I think the good news is, from a risk perspective, the increased focus on services as a revenue stream within banking, especially within big international banks like mine, is that's actually driving a level of collaboration that we typically hadn't seen in the past, because the services in and of itself isn't a thing. They don't naturally have a client. They're a product. They're an account. They're an FX transaction. But it's bringing the different bits of the wholesale bank together in a way that I think hasn't historically happened that much. So that's really helpful. I think the other thing that's really interesting is the work that banks have been doing around conduct and culture, especially the European banks, has really tried to address that issue. So I used to be the head of conduct and supervision at Deutsche Bank, and I think one of the things we successfully did was we were bringing different bits of our businesses together in ways that had never been done before, and having very real conversations about risks and controls that were, I remember one particularly vivid example where we actually just brought 3 equity trading desks together, one from Asia, one from EMEA, and one from the US. And the 3 of them were slightly astonished at the activity the other ones were doing. It was quite interesting. They were basically, it went from, I don't really understand why you do it like that, to gosh, are you sure you're allowed to do that? That's something we wouldn't consider doing in our jurisdiction. Went from that level, and then actually we brought other businesses into the mix as well. And it was really interesting because these people had clearly never talked to each other before. And then we led a management leadership team in EMEA only, where we deliberately brought different MDs from different bits of the business together. And it was really fascinating that they actually all wanted to work together, but they'd literally never had the opportunity to, because they were on separate trading floors. So equities was on level 3, rates was on level 2, the FX was on level 1. They couldn't even access each other's floors, and there was no communal meeting area. So one of the observations I made when I very first arrived there, I was talking to the COO about what the problems were from a conduct perspective. I said to him, I don't understand how you think you could possibly have collaborative culture here, because there is nowhere for anybody to meet. You have no generic space in this building. And he's like, oh, wow, I hadn't thought about that. So we started doing some stuff like having a coffee shop downstairs, a pop-up coffee shop and a pop-up ice cream shop, just to try and get people to start mixing and interacting with each other. And I think people don't always think about the physical environment carefully enough in that context, because if you don't give people the opportunity to meet, then they can't.
Okay, thank you, Toby. Toby, coming back to you, how can businesses create a feedback loop for continuous improvement in the risk management and their compliance strategies?
Well, so, I mean, the flippant answer would be they already have one. It's called internal audit, who come and give you the feedback loop of how badly you're doing in various areas. But more seriously, I mean, obviously, we talked today about continuous assessment versus quarterly assessments, and I think that's very nascent and still developing. I think as we roll out more and more and more continuous monitoring, we get the ability to have that feedback loop that you're describing, because instead of doing something weekly, monthly, quarterly, you should be in a position where you have a tool, as a supervisor, you have a tool which is saying, this happened today, what are you going to do about it? And that feedback loop then should start self-iterating, and we can use the information that we're generating on a daily basis to actually inform our risk decision-making. And I will stop there because I'm conscious of time.
Okay. Azizi, the second half of that question, what metrics or indicators do you recommend monitoring to assess the effectiveness of the strategies we just talked about?
I think for Petronas, we have employed a few. Of course, what Toby mentioned on the feedback, it's always there. It's always there for people to actually provide for the team members or for the compliance practitioners, for ourselves as well as for the compliance officers. Always having that in mind. So that is actually something that that's already been embedded in all our process and in all our discussions. Of course, the other one is that we have established is in terms of evaluate and analyze all these past incidents and also future trending, and also establish benchmark with other companies as well as other risk areas. And also, we already have our third-party risk management program in place. And this actually involves KYC and KYC6, and I think how do we actually implement that is to actually supplement the process and procedures that we already have, and all those are actually to ensure that we get everyone to do the same thing when it comes to assessing the risk areas that they are in. And of course, we have also been monitoring through our system, through my compliance, through my governance and my assurance that we have already established in the organization. So all those actually systems are important to tell us what are the data that have already been put in, and how do we analyze the data, and how do we actually use the data for our own assessment. And that is actually being used to also provide feedback to the business concern and also the risk practitioner in their respective areas. Monitoring the compliance trend by businesses are also important, and that's already been embedded. Breach reporting trends as well that we need to manage, as well as the qualitative feedbacks from the relevant unit within our organization across the business. Of course, the review by our internal audit to ensure that we applying the best standard and following whatever governance that we have internally. So all those things that I mentioned just now are already put in a system where our department is actually looking and managing and to ensure that appropriate controls are being introduced as well. So these are the things that we are also learning from other people. How do we actually handle all those information in order to get the best of the result from there? So I think that's where learning from other is also part of our important kind of process in order to get in order to check the reality on the ground, that we are not thinking about ourselves only, but also being practiced by others, and those are actually the reality check for us. Yeah, Mike.
Thank you, Azizi. I just wanted to take this time now just to open it up to the audience for any questions that you might have for our panelists about how they help manage interconnected risks. Any questions? All right. We got one right over here.
Yeah, I just want to say, is my voice here?
We got one coming right here. Right here.
My name is Hassan from Saudi Arabia. I just wanted to ask Mr. Azizi about the compliance department. First of all, the staffing, how many people in this department, and also is there any strong relationship with the internal audit, and also do you have programs, awareness programs that you can convey to the managers, or especially the new one who joined your company, so that they know the set of regulations or rules that need to be considered when they are carrying out their responsibilities?
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you for the question, Hassan. Currently, I have about 62 people managing the legal compliance on the areas that I mentioned just now, on competition and trade, sanction, export control, ethics and integrity, and data privacy. And those are actually, like I said, a sub-branch from our legal regulatory under the corporate risk profile. So, and we also have something like regulatory compliance under our business, but that one is at the operational level. So that's another tier. So for me, it's under the corporate that we are looking at, as we have to ensure that, of course, ultimately at compliance to legal requirement, managing the risk on the legal and regulatory. But on my section per se, on the 5 critical legal areas just now, we are actually looking into all our operations across the world. So all the officers that have been actually employed are basically being trained to actually look at how they are managing these 5 critical legal areas across the country, across the region. So there are certain areas that we need to do further assessment. This is where the system will be required, consultation with external will be required, because we need to certain extent customized all those programs to the country concerned. Because the reason is that one non-compliance or breach of any of that will actually impact the whole organization, our 500 over companies across the world. So we can't afford to have that, and because of that, we have to have that proper system in place to ensure all are talking on the same language, and they know what are the things that they need to look out for, so that if there's any potential of breach, they will have to actually mitigate it or avoid it, and do the necessary risk mitigation as well as risk management to ensure that those are being addressed at that point, at that level. So at the end of the day, all those will be going into the system I mentioned just now. So the system will pick up all those details, and those systems will actually being developed by my department with, of course, our technical service provider, what sort of things that we need to put in, and what sort of things that we need to control, and what sort of things that we need to generate from there. So those are becoming part of the my assurance as well. So from my compliance become my assurance, and my assurance become my governance under the Petronas risk just now, under corporate risk, that managing the entire risk across the company. So those are being connected under that system. I think your question relationship with the internal audit. Internal audit is actually part of our third line assurance, where after we do our first line assurance, that is my department for that area that I mentioned, then we do our second line assurance should we find there's something anomaly within the system in the my compliance just now. So if there's any anomaly, we would know why that anomaly happens, because we will do that checking or consultation with the business people who basically input all those data into the system. Right? So then the analysis will show that whether someone did not answer correctly or did not put the right input into that, then we will be able to detect that the incomplete information that lead to potentially non-compliance. So we will rectify that. So the audit will come in for the third line of assurance to ensure that we apply the right process, going back to our risk assurance just now and risk management. At the end of the day, the corporate risk on that particular item will need to be managed in that manner. All right.
Excellent. Thank you, Azizi. So that is going to bring our panel session to the end. If we could have a round of applause for our esteemed panelists, Azizi and Toby. Thank you.
Thank you.